Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's a P to the APV. That's me. What's going on, everyone? Today, I want to go over roughly about 5 different types of interviews that I have seen in a while. Now, in my career, I have given and I have received multiple different types of interviews. Every single interview that I have taken, I have used as a learning lesson, a stepping stone for the next interview. And the end result was that I happened to learn how to navigate a lot of these interviews. I've learned how to hack these interviews. I'm going to show you these hacks that I've learned, but I've also learned the common interview styles that people generally have and how to navigate those styles. So without further ado, let's jump into the 5. The first interview style is usually behavioral based. This is when the interviewer wants to ask you questions that are guided or intended to understand your behavior, how you are as a person. They're looking to see if you're a good fit for the team, but they're also looking to see if your behavior is a good fit for the company as well. An interview question like this might be, and this is something I've heard as an interviewee multiple times, right? Tell me about a time that you've worked with a colleague and you both had different ideas and those ideas may have clashed, leading to animosity. How did you handle that situation? And what did you do to rectify or remediate the situation at hand? Usually how the question's asked, something along those lines. Now, for some, it's an easy question. Your workplace is toxic. Well, yeah, sure, it's an easy question. But for someone like me, Pat V, it's not so easy. And the reason why this question is not so easy is because I generally do not work in a toxic environment where we're constantly clashing at each other and creating this animosity. That doesn't really happen. So what do? How do you hack that type of interview question? You lie. Just kidding, guys. Do not lie. I never recommend lying in an interview because it's actually harder to be sincere and believable when you lie. Don't do that. However, you can exaggerate a situation. So what I like to do is think of a situation where I have disagreed with someone in a workplace. Now, it's very common in a workplace, especially working in cybersecurity as a cybersecurity engineer like myself. It's very common to disagree with a coworker. In fact, it is encouraged to be able to disagree because as engineers, we must be able to challenge each other in order to come up with the most optimal solution. So it's common for us to disagree. What do you do with that exaggeration? Well, the disagreement might not be as severe, but you can make it seem like so. For example, I have a new solution to implement a VPN tunnel that goes from on-prem to cloud. And my coworker says VPN tunnels are overkill. We can just do HTTPS, TLS 1.3. Should be secure enough. All those are 2 different implementations. And in the real world, well, we probably would look at both and see which one is more feasible. But for the sake of this interview, we exaggerate. So we say that we had a disagreement, not a lie, and that's true. And we need to talk about how we rectified that disagreement. Well, we looked down the path of TLS. We started outweighing the pros and cons. Then we looked down the path of VPN. We outweighed the pros and cons. We matched the pros and cons to our cybersecurity posture, what's important and the company needs. And we decided to go with the one that matched the company best. Because even though we disagreed with things, it doesn't mean that there wasn't an optimal solution. Easy interview done. Passed, give me that job. But for these behavioral questions, it's important to, one, be yourself, but also it's important to make sure you're telling the truth, and you are allowed to exaggerate the truth just a bit to match your story. Just don't lie, because then it becomes harder to believe and you might stumble over this lie and it might become a little obvious depending on who you are. Number 2, technical question. Now, in cybersecurity, as a cybersecurity engineer, the technical questions will be a lot different from what you might have in other roles. However, I'm going to speak from the engineering perspective because those are the most interviews I've had. So from a cybersecurity engineering perspective, technical questions are usually designed to do one of 2 things. 1, test your knowledge about cybersecurity and how in depth you're able to go before you stumble over a lot of these concepts. That's 1. 2, catch you off guard, make you stumble. Well, why would an interviewer want to do that? It is actually common for, in cybersecurity, the cybersecurity engineering field, maybe IT as well. It's common for candidates to not know something if you probe deep enough. In fact, you're almost guaranteed to not know something if probed deep enough. Not everyone knows everything. Yep, Pat V, I'm not perfect. I'm still learning. Don't get tripped up with this kind of interview style. This interview style is looking to test what you know but also it's looking to see how honest you are with topics that you don't. So what I usually do, I love to study in-depth things, so it does sometimes take a while to get through that depth layer, depending on the topic. There are some topics you can throw at me and it's going out the window. But let's say it's a topic I know. Yep, I'm okay with going in-depth, and the interviewer can keep probing, asking questions. Eventually they will get to a question that I don't know. Now, depending on the interview style, I usually answer in different ways. But my favorite response to this by far is something along the lines of, hey, that's a great question. I don't know if I have the exact answer you're looking for. However, based on the knowledge that I have and the knowledge I've gained in the cybersecurity field, I can make an educated guess as to what the answer might be. Now, the implementation might be different, but my educated guess would be this. Then I usually follow with saying, again, I am not sure of the answer, and I don't want you to think that I'm just making something up, trying to pretend that I'm sure. I honestly don't know, and I would need to research this. However, I wanted to provide some kind of answer based on an educated guess, based on my knowledge that I have obtained throughout the years, months, weeks, however long you want it. This tells a recruiter one or two things. One, you don't know, and you're okay with saying you don't know. Two, just because you don't know doesn't mean that you're not able to provide an educated guess. Great. Three, you're willing to research. Well, those are the three things that they're really looking for when they start stumbling you with these questions that they know you probably won't be able to answer. So don't trip up on those questions. Say what you know, admit what you don't know, and start to learn throughout the process. And don't forget to thank that interviewer for even being able to get you stumbled, because now you have some more stuff to study. And that's the exciting part about cybersecurity. The third type of interview question. These are your yes, no questions. These are probably the easiest of the questions that you're gonna get. Now, these questions are something like, do you know how to use Splunk? Yes or no? Yes. Do you know how to use AWS? Yes. Do you know how to use Burp Suite? Yes or no? Yes. Now, these questions are probably the easiest or the hardest, because if you say yes, well, now you have to wonder, are they going to question me on those things? Usually they don't, but my advice to you is to only say yes if you know about the tool, somewhat about it. You don't need to be an expert. If you know how to do some things in that tool, say yes. It won't hurt. If you absolutely have never heard of the tool before, you don't want to say no. What you want to say is, I haven't heard of the tool. However, if you explain the purpose of the tool, I might be able to understand the underlying technology behind the tool, thus being able to vocalize a similar tool that does the same function. So what you're saying here is, no, I don't know this specific tool, but I might know a tool that's similar, thus making it easier to learn this tool. That's your argument. Four, you added there. Four. These are the critical thinking type of interviews. By far, some of the most fun type of interviews. Now, these interviews are very tricky, so it can go either any way. The interviewer can look for anything, but make sure that think out loud in any critical thinking interview, because the interviewer is looking to see how well you can think in a critical situation. It's that simple. So what does that mean? How does that look? Well, there's an example I can give. In fact, to better understand the critical thinking style of interviews, let me kind of warp over to my drawing pad. Okay, one of the critical thinking questions that I had was, I guess it wasn't so critical of a thinking question, if you catch my drift, but it was a good question, and we're going to go over it right now just so you can understand how some of these questions are structured. So the way that this question was structured is, you have 9 marbles. So I'm going to draw, see if I can get my thing to work here. I'm going to draw 9 marbles, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now you have 8 marbles, weighs 1 ounce. So 8 marbles weigh 1 ounce. 1 marble weighs 0.9 of an ounce. So you know that there's 1 marble that's not 1 ounce. Now you have a balance beam. I'm going to butcher my balance beam here. That's all right. Boom, 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 boom. And that's our balance beam. Now, you can only use the balance beam 2 times. And the goal here for this critical thinking question is to find the marble that weighs 0.9 ounce with 100% accuracy, meaning the strategy you use needs to find the 0.9 ounce marble every single time without fail. Seems simple enough, right? Well, go ahead and pause the video, try it out, see if you can do it. If you can't, we'll spoil it. But if you can, give yourself a pat in the back. You deserve it. Did you figure it out? Yes? I knew you could do it. I knew you could do it. We don't even gotta go over this, but we will. We will. Okay, so for those who didn't actually get it. Yes, it's considered a critical thinking question, but it's really not that hard if you think about it, right? So let's go straight to the answer. So let's do it the easy way. So we can only use this 2 times. So what I'm going to do is tally 2. And like I said, I recommend thinking out loud in the critical thinking question so that people know your thought process, especially for the interviewer. They're trying to see how you think and how you come to the end. So I'm going to tally 2. And every time I use a balance beam, I'm going to remove 1 tally. So for the first round, I'm going to use a balance beam for 3 marbles and 3 marbles. First 3 are going to go down here. So we'll say 1, 2, 3. For marbles, I swear they just look weird. The second set of marbles are going to go here. So we'll say 1, 2, 3. Boom. Now we have 3 marbles on the outside. 1, 2, 3. Boom. And we use 1 balance beam for these 2. So here is the thought process behind this. Now, the balance beam can go one of 3 ways. It can be stable, it can fall down to the right, or it can fall down to the left. Either way, we know where the marble that weighs 0.9 is. Now, I say that because if the balance beam is stable, that means every marble here has to be the exact same weight, 1 ounce, meaning the 0.9 marbles has to be on the outside. Now, if the balance beam weighs to the right, droops down to the right, we know that the left side has 1 marble that's 0.01 ounce lighter, which is why the balance beam is drooping one way. So we know that the marble needs to be on the left side. If the balance beam droops to the left side, we know that the marble has to be on the right side because it's slightly lighter. So those are the 3 ways that we can know. For the sake of this example, let's say the balance beam was actually balanced and the marble is on the outside. It doesn't matter because the strategy works regardless. You just switch. That's really all it is. You just switch the marbles you look at. So if the balance beam was stable, that means these marbles here inside the balance beam, we can throw those out because those all weigh 1 ounce and are exactly even. We don't need those anymore. So let's erase those. Boom. We can erase these arrows here. We don't even need these arrows. Boom, boom. We don't need this. And we definitely don't need this anymore. We have our marbles on the outside. I'm not going to do a full erase. I'll just do a little bit. So now we're left with these 3 marbles. And we use the balance beam 1 time. So again, boom, boom. Let's put this up. This marble here will go inside this balance beam right there. This marble will go inside this right there. And this marble goes on the outside. Now we've used our balance beam 1 more time and we got our answer, right? If the marble in the balance beam or the balance beam falls to the right, we know the lighter marble was the one to the left. If the balance beam falls to the left, we know the lighter marble was on the right. The balance beam is balanced at this point. We know the marble that was 0.9 of an ounce is on the outside. So with this strategy, we have 100% accuracy every single time. No matter how many times we run through this situation, this scenario, we can always find which marble is the lightest based on how the balance beam leans and based on the marbles that we place, especially if we're splitting it by 3s. So that's how you solve the balance beam critical thinking challenge, I guess you can call it. So critical thinking based interviews can be very challenging. In fact, hacking these interviews could be even more challenging. So here's some tips that I recommend when going through interview critical thinking. 1, make sure that you think out loud. Talk your thoughts out. That's one of the easiest ways for the interviewer to understand your thought process, and they might throw in some pointers there. 2, if you put yourself into a trap, meaning if you're going down the wrong path with your thoughts, do not be afraid to back out. It is actually far more efficient to back out and start over than it is to keep going down a rabbit hole that you're not sure of. Far more efficient. Plus, it shows the interviewer that even if you do get stuck, you're not afraid to backtrack and fix your issue. And 3, if all else fails, and even if you are unable to solve the critical thinking challenge, it's important to know that you may be able to still make up for it with the amount of effort and thought you put into it. Make sure you thank your interviewer and make sure that after the interview, you follow up and you also write down the question you were asked so that you can study it. Now, you do not want to study a critical thinking question just to know the answer, but study it to make sure that you are understanding how critical thinking questions work and that you're able to work out something like this in the future. Now for the final 5th interview question that I have experienced on an interview, the good fit question or the good fit based interview. Now, this type of interview is pretty much just maybe a couple of questions, but it's all centered around, are you a good fit for the company? The interviewer might ask something like, what are you looking for in your next role? What are your interests? What are some things you'd like to work on? Now, these questions might seem easy, but just know that if what you want to work on, if what you're looking for in your next role does not align with what the role at the company is offering, well, you're not a good fit. You're not going to get the job. Doesn't matter how qualified you are, just how it is. So with this, how do you navigate that? Well, to hack this kind of interview, my recommendation is, for one, study the role, know the role in and out, and make sure you ask questions with your recruiter beforehand. Now, once you learn the role as much as you can, cater your interests, your response to the role primarily. You can always ask more questions afterward, right? Cater it to that role. And when you're asked, what are you looking for in your role? You're pretty much going to regurgitate what you learned about the role. And that's what you're going to use as your answer as you navigate this interview question. Now, what happens to the stuff that you like to do that may not be included in a role? You can always ask. You can always try to figure it out during usually the end of the interview, the Q&A section. For example, someone like me who's a cybersecurity engineer, whatever role I work in, I want to be part of the incident response process because I find it to be extremely fun and, quite frankly, unique, something exciting, spice up the cybersecurity life. And so I don't want to include that in what I want my job duties to be during the interview. But what I will say is, usually if the question is, do you have any questions for me towards the end of the interview, I will say, sure. Can you explain anything about the role that I may have not known about or may not be in a job requisition? Things like incident response, things like XYZ, things like QRS. Are they in the role? Are they not? Just curious. I want to make sure that I understand the role fully. So I kind of led with things that I'm interested in without really saying that I'm interested in. So to hack this, that's what you really want to say to a recruiter. I mean, there are many other things you could say. There are many ways to say it. This is just what I like to do. This helps me to get an answer from the recruiter, whether these things are included in the role, and also be able to learn more about the role in case these things are included. Now, all 5 different interview styles, those are just the ones I've experienced multiple times, those 5 different interview styles. Now, it is important to know that just as you are interested in the company, a company that you interview for, that company is also just as interested in hiring the right candidates, which in this case would be you. So keep that in mind, because when you ask questions, you're going to be asking questions as if you were the interviewer and the company is now the interviewee, because that is how you start to understand more about the company and you determine if you're a good fit for the company as the company is determining if it's a good fit for you. All right, keep those tactics in mind, spice it up, mix it up. This is just a foundation approach, right? You still need to do your research. You still need to understand these interview styles. When you fail an interview, you need to go back to the drawing board and start jotting down how the interview went. You need to start picking things apart and figuring out, okay, where can I learn from here? How can I improve this process? How can I improve that? Not every interview is going to tell you what you did wrong. However, you can start to deduct, right? Form a deductive analysis on how the interview went overall and start identifying things that you can improve on for the next interview that you get at a company. Now, go out there, ace that interview. I'm rooting for you. Pap out.